Welcome all of us to this forum that has been arranged by AFELT. We are glad to have you. This is just one among the series of webinars that we've been running over the past 1 year, and we intend to continue doing the same going into the future. I will be your host today, being the 26th of May, and we intend to have this webinar for 2 hours. On the screen is basically how we plan to run the day. After this introduction, we'll invite the Vice Chair of AFELT to just introduce the webinar. Then we'll have a bit of housekeeping, ground rules to share. Then we'll have a small icebreaker to just put us in the mood of the workshop. Then we have lined up 3 guests who will be sharing with us their experiences, and we shall be interacting with them as they share with us between 10:30 and 11:50. And we believe that by around 11:50, we should be sharing a way forward and close the webinar at noon, Kenyan time. So thank you all of us who have been able to find time to attend. So far, we have 50 of us in the room, and that's a good number. And without taking so much of our time, allow me to welcome Professor Damaris Ikali, who is the Vice Chair of AFELT, to introduce the webinar. Damaris, please.
Thank you, Desmond, and good morning, everyone. I am happy that we are all gathered here this morning just to focus on research in our different universities, how we teach it, how we conduct it, and the other emerging trends. As you have heard, my name is Damaris Ikali once again. I teach at USIU, and I am one of the founding members of AFELT. And so mine is very brief this morning, just to take us through a few things about AFELT so you can get to know us better. And one of the things I would quickly want to talk about is the philosophy of AFELT, where AFELT in this case, perhaps some of you may be wondering, is an acronym that stands for the Association of Faculty Enrichment in Learning and Teaching. And so our philosophy, therefore, is grounded in several core concepts. One, problem posing. And in this, we are looking at the practice-based educational concept. And this was first created by Paulo Freire. We all have different accents when it comes to some pronunciations. So problem posing as one of them, the transformation of learning theory by Jacques Mesro, and the significant learning pedagogy developed by De Fink. And so in this philosophy, AFELT is driven by the core values of transformation of learning, which focuses on 1, becoming, over knowing. You realize that me and you, depending on when you went to school, must have gone through that process of knowing. Knowing was the emphasis. AFELT is here to talk about becoming versus knowing, meaning versus sense making. And so in meaning making, we want to emphasize the extent to which what our learners get from instruction and other activities in the learning institutions helps them make sense of that by applying what it is they learn. Knowledge creation over knowledge replication. You realize again, me and you who might have gone to school at the same time, the emphasis was mainly on knowledge replication. So you are given, give it out the way.
How do you want us to do it?
AFELT is taking a different approach, that learners are co-creators of knowledge. And that's what we encourage. Learning over teaching. Me and you who went to school at the same time we went in to listen to the teacher, and we became very upset with the teacher if they didn't dictate notes to us to write. Yeah. So in this space, AFELT is focusing on how well learning happens, because even me as a facilitator, I have the opportunity of learning. And of course, from the simplest definition, we look at learning as a change in behavior. So how do I change as faculty? How do my students therefore change? And so our philosophy is therefore about helping learners to become the people that they need or want to be. It is about helping learners to become change makers in the world, not just people who fit into niches in the world status quo. Our philosophy holds the constructivist understanding of how knowledge is created and how it changes learners and their world. It is always forward-looking to what learners are becoming, who they will be, and what they will do. And this contrasts with other philosophies that are based on acquiring, storing, and retrieving information. And so our philosophy holds that learners are in charge of their learning, that only they can truly transform themselves. We as teachers only facilitate that learning, but we can never transform the learner. It is the learner who picks from our facilitation and gets to transform himself. Having said that about the philosophy of AFELT, allow me to quickly go through what we are going to be focusing on today, which is the seminar, the webinar on, just a second, the webinar on transforming how we develop research capacity in institutions of higher learning. I wanted to be sure that I was saying the correct thing. And so in focusing on this, what are the objectives for today? We expect that we will explore emerging research and ICT trends and opportunities. And we have one of us as a panelist, and I am happy that they will give us insights into that. To continue the conversation about transforming research capacity in higher institutions, I believe we are all like-minded, coming from those institutions. And so in our conversations, let's go on and focus on how to transform research and capacity in our institutions. And then sharing those ideas, I think, will go on to enrich the way research is conducted in this country and beyond. Finally, to exchange ideas on building research capacity for both learners and educators at higher institutions. Briefly then, how does this webinar link to those others that we have conducted before? We had one webinar on how on changing mindsets, and in that particular webinar, we focused on how to embrace transformation in learning and teaching in higher education. And so this particular one continues that particular thinking, that you cannot therefore transform or help your learners transform themselves if they have a fixed mindset, but focus on a growth mindset to allow them think differently and do things differently. So that was the first seminar we had. And its objectives were to begin the conversation about changing mindsets, to explore our thoughts on changing mindsets, and to reflect the benefits of building research capacity in diverse ways. This is a continuation of that. Our second webinar was about transforming research training in institutions of higher education. And this one was to provide a platform for stakeholders to share their perspectives on research capacity development in universities and deliberate on opportunities for more transformative approaches in training research. And perhaps if I go back to me and you in school, if you are in school with me around the same time, I'm talking about the 70s, 80s, and a bit of the 90s, research was the fact that come listen to me, then go and write what you have to write. And you realize, going by the global trends and figures, Africa has remained lagging behind in terms of research production, while other continents are up there in terms of their research output. We have remained behind. It's even worse because we find most of us join institutions, and because research output is one of the conditions for promotion, we remain at a particular rank for quite some time. So it is important that we interrogate the way research is taught. How about those of us who teach it, who facilitate it? What kind of skills do you require so that you can facilitate in such a way that there is learning happening, and in turn, there is increased output, research output. So those are the webinars we have conducted before and how they link to this one. And so it is my pleasure to recognize your presence this morning. I am very excited that we have high minds and we are going to deliberate, hold conversations and chart a way forward into how we can therefore transform how we develop research capacity in our respective institutions. So thank you very much for listening to me. Feel very welcome. I believe and trust that you will seriously engage in the conversations that will be ongoing. Just in case you don't see me after a short while, I will still be with you, but I will be running to attend to my other duty, which is going to class. So thank you very much, everyone. Be at home. Thank you. Desmond, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Prof. Damari, the Vice Chair of AFELT. We shall be joined, I think, in a short while by our chairperson, who is Dr. Charles Kingsbury. And maybe towards the end of the webinar, we'll allow him to exchange some greetings with us. So thanks so much, Damari, for reminding us about the philosophy of AFELT, the fact that we believe that learners need to be at the center of the learning process, and we as faculty and our lecturers, our role is facilitate that process. And the permeating or pervasive theme for AFELT is transformation. So I believe we are going to be engaging with each other. Let's be open and maintain curious minds. We are here to co-create knowledge. We are going to share this space just to co-create knowledge. So let's participate actively. And of course, almost 2 years down the line with COVID, I'm sure we are now so used to how to handle ourselves during the remote webinars. Ideas about keeping ourselves mute until we are willing to speak. You need to raise your hand if we shall be picking it up. Make full use of the chat box if you want to engage, and I'm happy that already there's a lot of conversations that are taking place in the chat box. So just to put us in the same frame of mind, allow me to invite one of us, Dr. Kendi Muchungi. I believe, Kendi, you're ready just to warm us up a little and prepare us for the day. Kendi.
Yep, I am. Thank you all for being here. And what I propose is that for just the next 7 minutes, we can all please turn on our videos briefly. just so that we can be able to see each other's expressions, even as we're walking through this small, I don't know what to call it. I don't want to call it an icebreaker, this small activity, so that we can see each other. There'll be a bit of a game going on. And so it would be good to see your faces as we see who's on the leaderboard and who's not, as we move ahead. So what I'm going to do is I'll quickly put in a link in the chat. So all of you just click on that link and it will take you to a Mentimeter page, and just respond to the questions. When we get to the quiz, you'll have to key in your name. So there are about 4 questions, and we'll start seeing the leaderboard as we start working on this. So I will share my screen briefly. Here we go. And I'll start presenting, and we should be able to start seeing your responses live. So please feel free to start. And as is common with Mentimeter, there are emoticons at the bottom there. Feel free to use those as we move ahead. This is not lengthy, it's just a small activity. So let's begin. Oh, thanks. I like whoever sent the love heart. Now let's begin. Sorry. So where are you at now? Wow.
Waiting for the Dr. Kendi Muchungi to do the next one.
Thank you. So we're giving people a few minutes because I think we're about 77 we are right now. So I'll be seeing on here how many people have responded. And then I think after a few, maybe a minute, we'll move on to the next one. So 12 of us have responded. If we can get a few more to respond, then we can move on to the next activity. I think that's sufficient. So let's go. We have about 21 that have submitted. Okay, let's get to 25, then I'll go to the next question. Okay, next. So shifting gears a little bit, and a small creative thinking exercise. First question. So the question was, what 5th word matches with the 4 words that were before this, right? What's the 5th word that ties these 4 words together? And there's a countdown. Aha, interesting. The correct answer is white, right? White elephant, bleed white, white lie, whitewash. Okay, so I think we've gotten the gist of it. Let's go to the next one. Oh, that's the leaderboard. So I'm not sure we got that one right, but let's try and see the next one. Oops, sorry. Again, the same thing. What fifth word ties the four words that you see there together? Nine responses. Come on, guys, we can get a few more. Yay, I can see some of you got it right. Yes, let's see who did. Vicky. Whoa, Vicky and Wairimo, congratulations. If we're in the same vicinity, there would be a chocolate for you. So the right answer was beauty, right? Sleeping Beauty, beauty sport.
You're done.
Makeup.
So style, love, jacket, span. What fifth word ties these four together? Yes, I can see the correct answer is life, life jacket, love life, lifestyle, lifespan.
Go for how long? 3 weeks.
To go. To go.
So Shem and Daniel, you still have to catch up with Vicky and Wairimo, but good job. It looks like it's a gender, women versus men kind of thing. Let's see the last one. I don't know whether anyone got that one right. The right answer was pig, right? So pig Latin, pig skin, pig pen, iron pig. So I think the women have it in terms of the leaderboard. Vicky and Wairimo, but because there are four outstanding people there, maybe we can look for you and give a chocolate or something after this. Now, really, the last question that I have for you is, what do you think the quiz that you have just completed has to do with research and remote engagement during research? So we're going into a session talking about research and how we're doing research, especially remotely, now that we have the pandemic. So what do you think the quiz that we did has to do with research? Please feel free to share your thoughts. And that's the last question for this session. So we're 80 of us guys, 2 responses already. Really interesting responses immediately. There's a component of critical analysis I'm seeing there, ensures that one doesn't feel, one feels included, very unique way of collecting data, simple ways of ensuring that collection of data from participants is not boring or drab. There's a need for critical thinking and creativity. Research being remote is not easy. There can be misunderstandings, miscommunications, especially when there's a lot of diversity. When we're interacting virtually, very, very much agreed. With varying technological competencies, it can be difficult, right? For those, depending on where someone falls on the spectrum of how conversant they are with technology. It helps with connecting with people. Yeah, you get to meet multiple people. We have John here who's all the way from Wolverhampton, and I know there are a few others that are from a ways away that are here. So definitely allows for greater connectivity. Think outside the box and things are not as obvious as they appear. Very true. And I think there needs to be some level of creativity when we're doing research virtually. Sometimes communication is not clear. I saw someone saying that using short, simple questions is ideal, and using short, clear questions is ideal. One's assumptions are tested, modified, reshaped, but also a bit overwhelming if I do not know the context of the boundary set. Very true. You really do have to give context, right, to whatever it is that you're doing, especially if we're doing this virtually. On-spot critical thinking, tech connection challenges, literacy, diversity, public misinformation, recall versus recognition in learning. Oh, that's really interesting. It shows the 3 key aspects crucial for this. Time is of the essence, concentration is key, creativity is key. I think we'll be sharing some of your responses. On my end, thank you very much for taking the time to respond to the questions. And I think when we're listening to the researchers coming up ahead, we'll get to learn a little bit more about the implications of research, especially when it's done virtually. Thank you so much, and right back to you, Desmond.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kenny. And I believe we are now in a position to start engaging with our presenters. During the exercise, I think I got lost, and I think that is part of what happens in research. The times at which during which you're just between things, and it's part of the process, I believe. So thank you for that, and you are now ready to at least engage with your first presenter, who is none other than Dr. John Kanyaru, who is going to engage us basically in just broad perspectives about research, ICT, what trends there are outside there, and perhaps some of the opportunities we have in research. Dr. John is a lecturer at the School of Mathematics and Computer Science at the University of Wolverhampton in the UK. And he is a lecturer. Sorry, who has a PhD in software engineering from Bournemouth University, UK. And he has a BSc in computer science at first class honors from Egerton University, Kenya. And if I'm right, I believe John Kanyaru is from somewhere in Tharaka, but he'll be telling us a little more about that. His primary research interest is in software requirements, engineering, especially consideration of visual prototyping of software specifications as a means to validation. John is passionate about STEM, especially computer science, and recently he has delved into considering the efficacy of adapting educational technology or the so-called digital learning technologies in providing a learning experience that matches the traditional face-to-face experience. So join me in welcoming Dr. John Kanyaru, who is going to be our first presenter. Let's listen keenly, and then we shall be engaging him in a Q&A session after his 10 to 15 minutes with us. John, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dennis, for that kind introduction there. I'll share my screen and then we get started, shall I?
Yeah, sure.
Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
I'll try to get this in presentation mode. Yeah, thanks. I think you've done all I would have done to introduce myself. I work at the University of Wolverhampton. I've also got affiliations with a few other universities, and I say that because I will be mentioning a couple of things, especially with regards to collaboration and partnerships. I think over and above everything else, it's likely, and my preference would be, at least at the end of the day, we should be looking at how can we start working together if we are not doing that already. So again, I'm at the University of Wolverhampton, and what I want to look at or discuss a little bit is my reflections on research, teaching, and learning during this COVID period, and hopefully what we should be thinking about when the pandemic is out of the way. Hopefully not too far in the future. So a little bit about me. I think Dennis already mentioned my areas of interest: software requirements engineering. And these basic requirements are what people want the software to do for them. It's really important to understand what people want, so one can produce a solution for anything at all, even for physical artifacts. When somebody requires a bicycle, it's no use in giving them a quad pedal. So this is the territory in which I have a traditional interest. Then the other one is model-driven development, which really is me acknowledging that writing software is difficult. Even writing text, like this presentation, for instance, it's very difficult to express yourself in text, or I find it difficult. Maybe it's easier to draw. So the idea of a model is writing software by drawing it and considering the issue of requirements, because it's easy to draw architectures and produce solutions, but it's harder to express people's desires and produce designs and solutions. So that really is what I mean by model-driven development. But lately I've become also interested in what I call informatics for healthcare. And I want to say this is primarily preclinical healthcare. Really, there are some areas there that are of interest. Maybe I'll be mentioning those as I progress, but one of them is addressing errors that occur in medication. And the medication process can be quite, the scope can be large. There's prescribing, there's dosing, administration, and things like this. Then I'm also, of course, interested in education technology, me being a teacher like you, most of you. And this is basically using software systems to support teaching and learning. There are several names for this, including virtual learning environments, learning management systems, but mainly things that are well integrated to also include assessment and interactions like this. So for instance, it could be we use a virtual learning environment in which one of us, like Kendi Mochungi, presenting to us a certain topic within that environment, not over Zoom like we are doing now. So I'm sure we have all used those kind of tools, but the question is, how suitable are they? Have they helped us during the pandemic? So with regards to teaching interest, again, hopefully to mention a few areas, we all tend to get pulled here and there to areas that we have no interest in teaching, but primarily I'm interested in programming languages, software development. I'm just naming things in general. I'm also interested in what we would now call data science, including machine learning and topics like that. Even traditional areas of computer science like algorithms and data structures. I did mention affiliations with other universities. I mentioned that now before I progress. It's I have partnerships with the Brunel University in London, Oxford University, Goldsmiths University of London, as well as Curtin University in Australia. I do quite a bit of work. Some of them teach, others do some research with them. So anyhow, what I have thought we would consider is whether COVID has changed the way we do research. For instance, as research opportunities diminished in terms of funding, for instance. On my side, I would say I haven't noticed that, the diminishing of opportunities. What I've noticed is when funding calls have come through to my side, especially through email circulation for my research office here, the university has a research office which circulates opportunities. They tend now to have a very short turnaround time. And actually there have been quite a few coming through. So what I've not seen a reduction in that. Maybe what has increased is competition, because I think now, in absence of face-to-face teaching, which is has not been there for some time now, so people have got time to consider other things that they have probably not had time to. So there's been quite a lot of competition, and I know colleagues who have also started doing research activities, especially writing beans and things like that. What I miss, what I think I've missed is that likelihood of meeting a colleague in the corridors and having a discussion that you wouldn't have if you were going to make an appointment and have a discussion over Zoom. So for instance, meeting around pantries, having a discussion of a paper draft, or likelihood of putting across a bid. So those things have gone away. There is also the idea of a personal touch. And I think usually when you're discussing things with people face to face, you can also tell what their emotion is over things. And feedback is much quicker also. So this I think, and frankly, they are not small matters, because we just have to consider what aspects of our mindset we need to adjust in order to work in the environment we are in. The idea of tacit not information or tacit knowledge is things that you can tease out from people by having a chat with them that you wouldn't get otherwise. You know, they're not obvious things. People won't tell you some things unless you act them out, really. So in terms of opportunities, I don't think we have been terribly disadvantaged. Of course, it doesn't help to not have if you like, that physical presence we are used to. That's what I would say regarding where I feel we are with this. I'm just trying to advance here. I think I'm stuck. My screen is stuck here. Yeah, much better. Just bear with me a moment. So one of the things I think we would do in order to augment the gaps that exist is, of course, the use of ICT, but in various ways, which are not very new. I think what has happened is we have got better facilities now. So the idea of remote working is not new, or if you like, the idea of using technology to work from different locations is not new. I remember colleagues from Lancaster University way back, even before I came this side to do my doctorate. This idea of a collaborative working environment came about, or at least I got to know about it way back when former friends doing work with the European Commission were talking a lot about this, basically owning meetings over a wire, basically sending a signal across, and that's what we're doing now. But obviously things have improved. We no longer have to do teleconferencing through a telephone line. It is much better now, even in computing resources themselves, physical machines. What I think though we should look at is, because we have to work this way, then we are able to explore greater collaborations across regions. I don't remember the last time I had a meeting like this. It was a long time actually. So it simply means we can reach out a bit more. And I think what really is important is to look at each other as sources of strength, because we have all got different interests, different strengths, different expertise. And working together, as it were, it really helps. The other thing is, when it comes to teaching and learning, I know for sure students here have been not so happy about having to be taught remotely. They feel as if the experience is not the same. And I have to say, I think, I don't know what I would think if I was a student myself, but I miss to see my students face to face. But the question is, what really is learning? You know, how do we learn? We need to also think about the role of assessment in teaching and learning, I think. Rather than using assessment as a filter, maybe we should use assessment to guide on what better support we can provide to whoever needs it most. Just want to advance again. There you are. So when it comes to some of the research activities that I think some of us will be interested in, it would be, how then do we, for instance, I'm quite interested in machine learning, but applications of machine learning in different areas, for instance. So some of my colleagues have got extensive clusters where they deploy, or if you like, they train the machine learning models, but now they're not able to come into work. And I think is an opportunity now to consider the cloud. There are various competitions now, or if you like, competitor organizations providing excellent resources for this kind of work. Even excellent GPUs, for example, the Google Cloud, Google provides an excellent experimental GPUs. I'm sure not for deployment, but for experimental work. Amazon's SageMaker as well, Microsoft Azure. I think all I'm saying here is we shouldn't see absence of physical presence or physical proximity as if you like, as a disadvantage. I don't think so. If we are doing what we are doing now, clearly we should see these as opportunities to reach out to one another wherever we are. That's really the point I'm making here. Then when it comes to professional development, or if you like, developing our capacities, all of us really can improve. The things I thought about, again, if you like, removing these walls we tend to build within departments, within schools, and view one another less negatively. It's not competition. I think collaboration is a better term to use. Because, for instance, I'm interested, as I mentioned, in healthcare, but I'm not really within that territory, even if I'm really interested in that. And I've read a lot of articles in that area, for instance, in diagnosis, prescriptions, documents that outline relationships between drugs, illnesses, side effects, and counter interactions and all that. So the other things could be joint publications, and this is not something we need to have to wait for any resources for. I think we can look at, for instance, the COVID pandemic. Within, say, some regions, there's data from, for instance, there's a possibility that the way things have progressed or proceeded within, say, a region like East Africa, even Kenya, is quite specific to Kenya. And therefore, there are things to learn there that one cannot learn from what has happened here in Europe. So those are opportunities. And I'm only just mentioning one thing. So we really don't need to wait for grant funding to do that. But really what that can do is to provide evidence that we are researchers, we are active in research, which now helps when we're writing grants, because they're always looking for research activity as, if you like, evidence that we are involved in research. In joint supervision of students, this is something maybe we could discuss between faculties or departments. And of course, as I mentioned, exploring grant applications where our different strengths contribute to producing better, stronger proposals, because there's always competition. Now I thought to bring about a couple of very specific topics for research that are close to me. I mentioned already assessing the impact of errors in medication. For example, if somebody needs to attend or to be seen again by a doctor because something went wrong when they were initially seen, there are several things one could look at. How the time spent, the space they're occupying there that probably wouldn't be occupied or used by the appointment period could be used by another more deserving case that didn't have to be there because of that kind of a mistake. Also, bad days, if people have to be re-hospitalized. So there's quite a bit of that, but I suspect, again, is there data though? Is there data to assess these things? I don't know. For the case of the US, I know there's quite a bit of data there. There's quite a lot of data here in the UK as well. And the University of Brighton actually has looked at these kind of things. The other stuff is, when it comes to, I know we should speak positively about ICT or the use of computer systems in facilitating things like teaching and learning, for example, or even healthcare. But I like to ask the silly question, like, is there evidence that adopting software systems really improves patient outcomes? You know, it's sounding as if I should know better, but is there any evidence? Could we look at how doctors work and check whether the systems we build actually support how they work, or we want them to fit to the systems we build? Is there any alignment? You know, those kind of things are actually a question. Those are social technical issues, I think. Then there is also, there's a lot of talk about machine learning, deep learning, but again, applications of these things in things like interpreting medical images like radiological MRI scans and things like that, because there are not that many experts in these areas. So if we believe the hype of deep learning and machine learning, why can't we train systems to help augment the missing expertise? Then the other stuff is, I know there are a lot of problems to do with hypertension and stroke and things like this, and there are many reasons that cause this. But then again, we don't have a lot of doctors. Is it possible again to look at ICT, these kind of areas, and see whether it's possible to consider systems that can support doctors work in those areas? When it comes to education technology, I'm always questioning things like, are we trying to get ourselves to work with systems that have been pre-thought for us? You know, I think it's my English teacher way back in Kenya that was telling me that Africans, or maybe Kenyans were born actors. You know, even as I speak, you can see I'm moving my hands around, and you know, sometimes you can almost tell somebody's ears are almost, you know, we like to get animals to talk. So if is the uptake of education technology what is the uptake? I don't know really, but I suspect it's not that high among most learners, not least in institutions of higher learning. Why? Is it because we're trying to give somebody a bicycle when they actually requested a quadruped, you know, or a car? Could we look at the requirements? How can we facilitate learning better? Can we get requirements from the stakeholder and then build from there? I'm thinking that is something to consider. I actually started building something based on some feedback I elicited from, you know, most of you will know Nakuru. I went to a few schools there. I did some bit of teaching, actually. I was teaching maths and a bit of ICT in some schools, just for an experimentation. And I started thinking about, and then also considered how similar age students are taught here in the UK, and started thinking of something purely though oriented to computing. The other question I have is how we measure learning, and maybe this is something quite personal to me, because I think when I was assessed both in primary, secondary, and university back in Kenya, it was a lot to do with filtering and discrimination. You want the best student, the average, and the poorest. To be honest, it seemed as if assessment was basically a way of saying we want to get rid of some people. Maybe, of course, we need to know where people fit for various reasons. But I think, among other reasons, I think we should be saying, can we, by reason of where we think people are, get them where we want them to be? That's what I'm thinking. And that needs to be built into our learning management systems as well. So that's basically, those are specific topics, but that I would very much consider collaborating upon. But when it comes to specific stakeholders, I'm thinking there is a lot of focus on women and girls in education, basically because it's seen normally that women and girls don't get the same access as men, as boys, and like males. Then there are refugees and those informal settlements. By informal settlements, I also mean dwellings in cities where people struggle to make a living. Then there is also focus on women in STEM and people living with disabilities. I mention this because I've seen that a lot of cores usually tend to be wanting to focus on these kind of priority groups, if I want to say that. Going forward, I think, what can we do, basically? What can we do from today? I go for the easiest things. If people are interested, we can start with the simplest things, because first of all, we form friendships, and from there we explore our common strengths. If there are people teaching computing in this group, in this room now, you can share your materials with me, I can share mine in any topic of interest. Also happy to explore a joint degree between my university, I mean Wolverhampton, and other institutions I mentioned, especially Oxford and Brunel. I could try even Bournemouth, actually. Bournemouth, these will be happy to hear me. So happy to explore that. What will be the benefit? You have to consider what your university gains, and my university, of course, will be considering what they gain. But in general, our students, what do they gain from that kind of collaboration? This is already happening, by the way, among other universities here, especially some universities here, some universities in Australia, some universities even in Dubai, where I've also worked before. So when it comes to publication, again, we all know the process. You have your evidence or data. We write together. We do our literature review together. We submit to places we think basically are relevant for whatever we are writing. This, I think, is something we can start now. We don't have to wait. So I think that's it for me. If there is anything else people expected me to mention, please do ask when it's time to ask questions. And thanks again for your time. I hope I've not taken too long.
Oh, thank you so much, John, for your presentation. I think I've picked a few items that we want to engage in. Touched a bit on the impact of COVID-19 on research. And I think you mentioned there that you've noticed that the short turnaround times and competition still remains quite stiff in asking for calls. You talked about augmenting gaps in ICT, where you've emphasized that the absence of physical proximity should not be seen as a handicap. And then I noticed that you spent some time on how we can enhance research capacity and possible areas of research collaboration, and even painted a possible way forward for us, and emphasizing just the fact that there's a lot of room for co-working and collaborating in research and ICT. So allow me to open this space for some interactions from the group with John. My team, Kendi, Wanja, help me through the chat also to see if we have any things that we can engage with John for just about 10 minutes.
Sure. I don't know whether I should read or whether Professor Paul Kamau Mbugua would like to ask his question that he put up in the chat.
Yeah, is Prof. John Mbugua there? Maybe could say it himself.
Yeah, Paul Mbugua, if
Yeah.
you're there. If not, I can read it. He asked a question to you, Dr. Kanyaru. Great ideas on areas of collaboration. Which are these priority areas in the area of learning and research that you're interested in? And I'm assuming for the opportunity for collaboration with Kenyatta University, Department of Plant Sciences.
Sorry, the areas, I'm actually reading areas of collaboration, which are these priority areas in the areas of learning. Yeah, I think personally, I'm just curious for us to have evidence on things that we want to, the interventions we want to have. We need to have evidence, first of all, that drives the interventions we want to have. So for instance, the first thing I would say is I don't know whether there has been a very good uptake of education technology. And education technology, I mean things that facilitate teaching and learning. We know before COVID, we were still using virtual learning environments to an extent, but after COVID came and we were all locked down, it became that we got the VLEs or the LMSs are basically the tools by which we teach. But I don't know, because are they being really that used? For example, I know somebody told me Google Classroom was a tool that a lot, I don't know, schools and universities were using, others were using Moodle. But when you look at these tools, how well have they been taken up by staff and students? If by taken up is what percentage of our staff and students are using this, and to what extent, then if the uptake is not what we would expect, because, and I mean an engagement, then why not? If the issue is the tool, then we need to think about going back to my territory. Maybe it's because I'm biased towards the idea of getting to know what the customer wants. I would just want us to check whether maybe we need to look at what kind of tools would work for our colleagues, for our students. Because maybe even animations, even graphics, even the examples that drive learning from one step to another, maybe this needs to be better presented to our young people than what Google Classroom, for example, does, or what I can't remember. There are quite a few that I've looked at, and frankly, I felt that I personally feel they maybe can do with improvement. I'm not talking about their functionality. They work. I can upload content. I can create exams, but I think the aesthetics, the presentation. Usually these things tend to impede some learners for some reason. So I really think we need to assess whether we need to consider things from scratch from our side. So in terms of collaboration, education technology is one. The other one is actually doing things that ask questions that seem almost like, people don't like to be asked the why question. It's almost as if I have to believe you, but show me evidence. So for instance, what is the evidence that if we use iPads in schools, students learn better? I don't know. I don't know. Have we checked this? If, for instance, I teach maths with iPads and someone else teach maths without iPads, can we check that the one who taught with iPads produced better learning, better learning outcomes for the students? Because then we can check what is causing the disparity in learning. Is it me, the teacher? I don't know. So it's a question of really looking at these things, and I think it's very multidisciplinary as well. Then I think if you're in agriculture or plant sciences, there is also the area of agri-tech. The idea of agri-tech is use technology to either provide up-to-date information when it's needed. For example, the idea of pests, when pest control should be performed, market data and things like this. But then again, why is it not taken up, this technology? I'm sure there are solutions there already that do wonderful things. Why are they not being taken up? We could start with those kind of empirical investigations, which are publishable, and then build on that for proposals that can be funded. Sorry, I'm asking questions rather than answering any.
There's also another question, but I think Professor Sauda totally agrees with you, Dr. Kanyaru. She also talked about the idea of education technology that is for the global south, built by the global south for the global south to meet our needs, right? And hopefully that would enhance learning, the learning that is happening. There is also another question from Dr. Muhavina. I hope I said that correctly, I'm sorry. Could there be need to change how we assess, especially in the sciences and technology areas? Instead of focusing on grades, can we use diverse ways and means to let our students work on projects and case studies? Maybe what's your experience in this regard and what are your suggestions?
Brilliant. I think I really like that. Actually, I do that most of the time. I try to, the idea of a project, and I think that really depends on the subject, but I think most projects can be assessed that way anyway. For instance, in my subject area, which is largely software engineering. So rather than get students to do, to answer questions and basically I write questions like, for instance, what is a data structure and things like this. I prefer to basically give them a task that is as close as possible to anything that can be encountered in the real world, and then give them time to do that. Because even in industry, people are not sat down and given an exam. They are actually given work to do. And it's not usually do it in two hours. Usually it's some time, and there is research involved. So what I like to look at though is genuine research, because of course there's some students who will want to give that task to somebody else to do for them. So obviously there are ways of checking that is not happening as much as possible. But that I think is more preferable in my view. There's a time and place for asking impromptu questions, like in class. Again, just checking whether people are following, and to keep people awake, where you can ask questions almost like in an exam, or even write them on the board. But I think project-based, problem-based, the idea is solving problems. It's really not about catching people who have not, if you like, reached where you want by when you want. when it comes to maths, for instance, because maths seems to be looked at with a lot of dismay and a lot of fear, I think the problem is, again, we don't present that subject the way we should, in my view. I'm sorry, I know that mathematicians here, but if you look at the mathematics of, say, statistics and probabilities, it's beautiful. But the way we're taught is, I think the teacher would write on the board and you follow these long equations and all that. Sometimes you're understanding it, but what's the point? What it is for? Look at linear algebra, for example. All we are calling machine learning is actually mathematics. So if, for instance, you look at an algorithm like linear regression, basically prediction, I think that's maths, definitely is maths. But when we were taught linear algebra, the teacher never made the link. It's only later in my life I'm realizing this is actually beautiful stuff with a lot of application. I really am enjoying it now. After how long? Maybe we can now start creating those links, so that our young people can see the application. I think it's also good for us because otherwise it's very dry, isn't it?
Yeah.
Thank you, John. Kenji, I know there's still a series of questions. We'll have Dr. John coming in again towards the end. Maybe we could take just one last one before we transition to the next presenter.
Could I ask a question?
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you very much. I also thank the presenter, John Kinyaru, for the good presentation that he has given us. I'm from African Nazarene. My question is on assessment on large classes. What could be the best way of accessing large classes so that the students can benefit and also the lecturer can meet timelines? Thank you.
Thank you, Makasa. I think there is a question of resource, isn't it? Because usually here our classes are big as well, of course, depending on the level. Here we have level 4. Level 4 is basically first year, and level 6 is third year, which usually the final year. There is also an honors year. But the lower the level, usually the greater the number of students because they are doing some common modules. So what happens there really is the department assigns several tutors for certain activities, like lab work, for example. So when I teach my 180 students, and believe you me, I have sometimes 180 in front of me, that's in a lecture hall. So there I don't need somebody else, but when it's lab work, the university basically provides extra members of staff to go in there, different rooms though, students are divided into cohorts of maybe 40, and these are done over a couple of days. When it is assessment, then we do the same thing. So it's not something that is a resource question there. But I also see, I hope I've answered your question, Makasa. The other thing I've seen here is a question on, if I can answer that quickly, what can be done to promote areas such as AI and deep learning, use of Python? I think the key is to have a project in mind. If you want to learn Python or deep learning, really you can't go far without a substantial problem to solve. So we could perhaps consider problem or projects that we can get maybe an MSc student to work on while they are learning. They are also teaching us, or a PhD student. I learn a lot from my students, to be honest. So you can't do it for fun. There has to be a problem to solve. Otherwise, you have other priorities, really. So I think we can come up with, I'm sure I can come up with a couple of projects for us to work with on various things, even some of the ones I mentioned anyway.
Yeah, thank you so much, John. Maybe we'll pause at that note where I think you're promoting that, proposing that for deep learning to be promoted, we may want to adopt more of a problem-based or project-based learning if we are to see better achievement of our learning outcomes. So we'll pause there and maybe move to the next session where we want to get perspectives. John has given us a broad peek of what the trends are and perhaps possibilities, but we want to go now in the shoes of a learner, PhD student, get what his perspectives are about how research has been impacted on him during this phase where we are trying to transition things from face-to-face to remote. And this will be shared by us by none other than Mr. Brian Kizito. Kizito is a health system management candidate at the Kenya Methodist University in Kenya. He is an epidemiologist with vast experience in health systems strengthening in Africa. Specifically, Brian has worked with Moi University School of Medicine's AMPATH program. He also worked as a reproductive health epidemiologist with the Measure Evaluation Program, and currently works as a senior program officer at the Africa Academy of Science. He's been involved in driving national and subnational health-related agendas, and he has made immense contributions in the development of some key policy guidelines for the Kenya's Ministry of Health. Away from health, he is passionate about human capital and specifically building his fellow young people and contributes to the shaping of leaders in Africa. Brian holds a master's in epidemiology and disease control and is currently, as we mentioned, a PhD candidate in health systems strengthening at the Kenya Methodist University. And his research focuses on simulating health system models that can help meet the current and future adolescent sexual and reproductive health demands. So join me in welcoming Brian for the next 10 or so minutes to share with us his perspectives. Brian.
Thank you very much, Desmond, for the glowing introduction. I want to assume Candy is running my slides.
Yes, but sorry, my computer can be a little slow. Just give me a minute.
Okay, as you put that up, as I said, thank you very much, Desmond, for the glowing introduction, and thank you for your attention here. I want to begin this by making something clear. This is not because we are talking about research. This is not evidence, but these are just my perspectives. So I know I'm talking to knowledgeable people and skeptics, and I'm saying that in a manner to compliment us. But I just want to say, maybe for anyone who has research interests here in learning, they might use this as a way to formulate hypotheses. So one other thing before I go on to this slide is, when I was trying to prepare what to talk about, I was conflicted between two things: the magnitude of remote learning activities in research. So if you're talking about webinars, conferences, impromptu learning activities online meant to spearhead research, I was conflicted between the magnitude of activities and whether that translates into the actual transfer of knowledge or the appetite for research. So as I go through my 3 slides, I want to tell you that I have that question in mind. So onto my first slide. As a student, I want to give you 4 quick scenarios, and and these scenarios are meant to paint the complexity of teaching or being on the receiving end as a student, being taught research remotely. So scenario 1, imagine that you're learning about, just to follow Dr. Kanyaru's example on linear regression, you're learning about the 4 assumptions of linear regression. You're in the middle of, the lecturer is in the middle of brilliantly explaining linearity, for example. In the middle of it, a student goes like, or a colleague goes like, "Excuse me, hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello." So what I'm basically trying to say is, there would be some interference that, in a way, that would interfere with that thought process, either for the lecturer, for the professor delivering this, or for you as the student. That's not to say, and because we are appreciating, we have a healthy level of appreciation that we are doing this remotely, so there might be some technological issues that people are going through. The second scenario I wanted to paint was this. You're actually sitting, you're writing your exams remotely, and you want to write those linear equations. Just imagine in writing the beta, the alpha, and etc. Those beautiful mathematical equations that we have in statistics. So I've seen what I've gone through is you have to write your exam on paper, then consult Google Store or App Store, download a scanner, and then upload that into the interface for the examination. So there's that extra layer of inconvenience. However, saying that, I am not arguing for or against the process of transferring research knowledge through remotely. This is the other example I want to give, scenario I want to give. You're a student and you're just about to defend your thesis. You spend the entire night trying to shape your 15 slides in the format of the university, to the point that you have gone through the material so many times that you can't even see your grammatical errors. But then in the morning, when you're just about to now think about the process and how the day will run, you remember that this is actually, you're going to do your thesis defense online. So there's that extra layer of comfort that you get knowing that you're not in the same room with your professor who can pinch you if you forget what your null hypothesis was. So there's an environment where you're sort of happy to know that I can be comfortable in my skin, in the comfort of my homestead, and still deliver that. The other thing is, during the process of delivering, what I have seen is, if Dr. Kanyaru is teaching me about something about linear equations, for example, I can quickly confirm something and it can shape my understanding going forward. So the fact that you could quickly try to confirm something, I think that provision is good. Having said that, I want you to understand, as a student, I'm saying that we really can't argue for or against being taught research remotely. But I think it's time to see what opportunities, because this is how we have to move. It's time to see what opportunities this provides to us. And so, next slide, please. So what I wanted to do, and I really am grateful to hear the opening remarks of Professor Sikalie, is about the vision behind this kind of work at AFELT. And I just wanted to look at, I wanted to throw in a few things, not necessarily to prescribe anything, but to tell you as a student, if we are trying to meet modules, if we are trying to meet the objectives of research modules remotely, yes, we can. But just going back to the sentiments of Professor Kanyaru, I think we should be thinking slightly broader. We should be thinking about making students or pushing students towards a place where their imaginations can be spurred. They can think beyond the boundaries. So as a candidate, I wanted to talk about some of the things that I have seen as opportunities for us to deliver research remotely. So I'll look at a few things. Some of these things might be touchy, but I was assured by my professors here that this is a safe space, so I can shoot you.
It is, Brian.
So I can shoot you and deliver this. But very quickly, this is my second last slide. But I wanted to talk about a few things on research learning outcomes. And one of the things that I found very difficult rephrasing was the fact that there's I call it a professor-student hierarchy, or I looked through some journals, and I think people have phrased it nicely to say the need to append the hierarchy of learning, and this is a shift towards being learning being teacher-centered towards student-centered. That means, I like what Professor Sikalie prefaced this with, that perhaps thinking about thinking about changing the shift from knowledge creation to from knowledge regurgitation to knowledge creation. Dr. Kanyaru has spoken about certain pitfalls during assessment, pushing students towards finding meaning in their research. This opportunity to look at what platforms are there and what the process of teaching remotely has, I think this is very key, so that there is mutual respect and students and the faculty actually partner together for better research outcomes. I don't think I can explain that point better, but something for us to learn. Now, the other thing is this. As a student, I have noticed this fixation on best teaching practices. I've hyphenated that too, so that we take it as one point. The best teaching practices in the West or the East or in Shimalavandu, where I come from. The shift towards better teaching practices, which means if we incorporate the process of learning here means usually looking at the context of the students you're teaching remotely, but also seeing what can you apply. What I liked what Dr. Kanyaru said, that if you're sober enough to relate what linear algebra is and how it relates to machine learning, being alive in that context can really help us always look for better practices, so that we are not fixated on a certain blind spot. Say, we've been told this is the best practice. Let us, as faculty, approach it in delivering research online. So the other thing that is interesting to me, and I think I don't think I got this realization when we started doing online learning of research, was the benefits of pushing students to think about their thinking. So because we are talking about research, I know I know a lot of you have heard about the Dunning-Kruger effect, where because of cognitive bias, you can overestimate how you can do tasks. So in terms of research, because we are pushing people to think about certain principles, but also to go out of the world and think about the best ideas and how you can transform them. The opportunity for online teaching can actually is a call for faculty to push for metacognitive study methods. For example, I got this from one of the journals. Preview, attend, review, study, assess, schedule. So teachers could provide guidance on how students can prepare for the future. You have your learning materials, prepare the future. I remember this from our undergraduate, where we used to learn through problem-based learning. You're given a scenario, you go research, come to presentations, but you're learning through that. So preview, make sure in attending, students should ask questions based on their preview of the material, and then review. So soon afterwards, the students should read and annotate their notes. So basically what I'm saying is this opportunity for remote learning you don't necessarily have to do point and click. I like what, again, I'm referencing Prof. Sikalie, during the 70s, 80s, and early 90s, to mark her words, that you want the lecturer to dictate notes. But there's an opportunity here to say, this is how we've understood analysis of variance. Or this is how we've understood referencing your problem statement. But what does it mean? Are you, in your referencing of this, as we teach you remotely, are you missing the point? So this could be quick wins for learning outcomes. But then, what I'm asking, and I think my argument here to teachers of research and to those championing, or to those who are in the process of pointing us as students towards knowledge, is to look at the bigger vision. I love to reference music in two words. If you look at a beautiful piece of music, if you if you keep focusing on a single note, I think the music won't be as beautiful as you looking at the end vision. Our end vision here, as we look at these methods of teaching research remotely, should be continuously building a culture of research excellence in Africa. I don't know how to define African science, but I think Dr. Kanyaru did a good job at saying context has to be put in mind. And so the overall goal as you're meeting your modules, I've seen as a student, is not just for me to get my grades in advanced statistics for research, but it's to ensure that we constantly create an environment where we can build a culture of research and excellence. So there are three better and evolving practices that I have experienced as a student as I finish my presentation here. One is to create safer spaces for students to challenge each other. Remote platforms do offer that, where I can challenge my fellow colleagues in research. They can challenge me in research. So this you're actually adopting this idea of task shifting in psychology, where I'm not arguing with you to prove a point, but as a fellow student, I'm working with you for us to better shape our research interests. The second thing is, while appreciating the dynamism of teaching research online, in that dynamism, you can actually set certain structures of operation. I will reference Kenya Methodist University, my university, where we have weekly colloquiums where students and faculty meet. And these colloquiums are open to everyone. Students from other departments can actually come and listen to you run your concept for 10 minutes. And they don't shoot you, but they ask you to question your assumptions. They tell you to zoom back and see what things are you overlooking. That's a very safe space. Now, it's very dynamic. People volunteer to speak. But what I'm saying is, even in the dynamism, we should set some guidelines and standards. So there is an actual time. Everyone knows it's colloquium time. There's a frequency to it. There's a chair. And faculty and both students co-chair. There are slides to it. There are certain standards to be kept. So in the dynamism of teaching research remotely, we have an opportunity to set guidelines so that we are within scope. The last one, which is one of my favorites, and I will put Dr. Kanyaru here on the spot. African universities and the universities, by that extension, have the most beautiful credos. You might be credo here, I mean, what's your catchphrase? The university of the 21st century, or the university that's looking to change science and technology. I think this is the opportunity for us to talk to some of the things that Dr. Kanyaru has said. Design as a university platforms that can help facilitate some of these things. I want to make a presentation to you guys, and I want to doodle, because naturally, when I draw and teach my daughter Namirembe how to write something, I want to draw it for her. I want to make a presentation by writing the H note, and this is mine. Universities should be challenged to have those interactive platforms, visualization platforms that can assess this. Now, onto my last slide, and for real, this is my last slide. Candy. My last slide is just saying, in a nutshell, that if, as faculty, we decide not to do anything, appreciate the historical methods of teaching, or appreciate that I've been teaching research for 25 years. I know exactly that the rules of regression won't change. How to state a hypothesis won't change. A statistical analysis, how to do descriptive analysis won't change. I think if we are still stuck in that, we are stuck while the world is passing us. And that's equivalent. As people, just look at it. As people pass, you're actually remaining behind. And what I'm saying, if we are As a student, my challenge to faculty is this. If you're really trying to build a culture of excellence, we have to be very categorical about what we do in terms of continuous research learning culture, be clear about the process accountability of learning. This is what I mean. If you have your modules, I think we should not just be fixated on the outcomes of, I've set exams, I've marked exams, students have done presentations. Those are outcomes, but what's the meaning? Knowledge creation. As student, can I be approached? Do we have the necessary requisite tools for delivering of this content? Are we changing with times? Are we supporting African interests? And then the last thing is having an appetite for moving with time. Thank you for your attention here. Over.
Thank you so much, Brian, for that loaded three-slide presentation, where you've given us some of your experiences from the classroom and what perhaps you've encountered during exams, and just encouraging us as faculty that there are opportunities in us looking at how we can teach research methods remotely, and for even finishing on the note that challenging us to have an appetite for moving with the times. Thank you so much. For about 5 minutes, can we engage with Brian? Kenny, do we have anything on the chat? Let's engage with Brian a little more.
But even as we're waiting for people to engage with Brian, the one thing that really stood out for me was the component of magnitudes of activities and whether this translates to knowledge in research. I think that is totally powerful. And I'm wondering whether you are reading Ron Richards' A Map of Thinking when you wrote that or not. But it's totally true in all facets of learning. Sometimes we assume that the more activity you give students, the more learning and engagement there is, and it doesn't always translate. So in terms of some of the activities that you've seen with regards to research, what are some of these multiple activities that you've seen that you think maybe don't contribute towards the actual learning or the knowledge opportunity for knowledge creation?
Dr. Kendi, that's a controversial question. But
we have created a safe space. Going back to your slides, we have created a safe space.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I can't point to anything, but the frequency here would mean that, no, I don't know why. I mean, I like assessment, but the assessment shouldn't be confused as measuring my progress, because measuring my progress should be looking at new concept, going into spaces, I've seen one of my colleagues here, Obi. Obi will tell you, going into spaces that people fear going into. If you're talking about adolescent sexual reproductive health, you're gravitating towards it. But what I'm basically saying, one of the things that I took a short stint in lecturing, and I think I was fired because I was giving students one question and practical questions. This fixation on 3 assignments, two cuts, and that. I'm not talking about the spirit behind it, but the fixation on this is the system that the university or faculty takes, so we have to abide by it. That is okay, but usually the point is there's a blind spot. You don't have let me even ask, not to get an answer, but you've taken up students through a module. How confident are you that they've actually grasped that knowledge? Is it because they're getting certain grades? Absolutely not. But you want to see them in spaces where they can actually apply. And now when we talk about advanced research, it's not here now. It's perhaps investing in 5-10 years. Because if I'm doing a PhD and I'm running an intervention study, it would, for you, you can actually assess the rigor of my methodology at that point in time, but you won't assess my appetite to go with the changes that happen as my study environment changes. So no right answer to it, but just being sensitive to, yes, I'm doing this, but to what end? I'm doing this assessment or this learning activity on research, but towards which end? Is it really benefiting the students? That is good.
Yeah, maybe just to respond just a little bit to that comment, Brian, I think you're referring back to what Dr. Kanyaru spoke about, where we're introducing authentic tasks. And
yes,
in AFELT, we really talk a lot about that component of authentic. And the authenticity comes with how does it actually apply in the real world? And so if you're asking your student, what is linear algebra, as opposed to being able to evaluate their application of this, giving them an activity that helps them apply their understanding of linear algebra. Or even with regards to research, which is what we're talking about at this moment, the idea of a problem that you're solving, and I liked when you talked about the process, looking at the accountability at every process to support this component of authentic learning, so that it's not just for the certificate that you're getting, but at the end of the day, it's what it's going to contribute to when you get out into the world, how you solve problems, the kind of research, the kind of evidence, how you look for evidence so that you can be able to solve for the problems that are there. Sorry, Desmond, back to you.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know, Brian, if you want to add something. I'm liking the comment from Kanyaru there that perhaps a combination of activities so that the assessment, in quotes, is as inclusive as possible. Do you have a last remark, Brian? We want to transition to the next presentation.
Yes, my last remark is the point I struggle putting across on appending the hierarchy of learning. And especially in African universities where I'll insist, and I'll say this because I've been assured it's a safe space, where people insist, call me Professor Brian, or call me Dr. Brian, or that's a silly example, but there are certain impediments being put in place to ensure that students are not necessarily respectfully challenging their lecturers when learning research, but there's a safer space where I can come to you as Professor Wanja and tell you, you've been teaching me about health financing. But I wonder whether you thought about this. And then Professor Wanja will say, I think you're onto a point. What do you think? Could we cascade this to other students? If that can be lifted, students like me who find it difficult to find supervisors because we are maybe deemed as political, and yet it's not political, it's just trying to shift the center of gravity of science. That can be good. Over, and thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brian. It's been great getting perspectives from Alana there, from you. And we believe you'll still be here because we'll have a brief session at the end to maybe do a wrap up. So those have been perspectives from Alana. We now want just to hear, as we move toward the tail end of our webinar, what do those of us who teach think about how remote learning has impacted on teaching research methods? And we are happy to be joined by Dr. Emily Eroche, who is a lecturer of mathematics and teaches research methods at African Nazarene University. She has a PhD in biostatistics from Moi University, Kenya, an MSc in statistics, and a BA double maths, both of which are from the Kenyatta University. As I mentioned, Emmy teaches mathematics in the School of Science and Technology, Department of Computer Information Technology at ANU. She has over 20 years experience in teaching, some of which is at high school and some at the higher education. And in her 20 years experience, she has also acquired leading and counseling skills, and some of her research include construction of rotatable simple designs with its application to petroleum biodegradation, and also estimating mediating factors influencing performance in mathematics at KCSE level, which was a data survey at Kajiado District, Rift Valley Province. Currently, she's working on a research that is entitled COVID-19 Effects on Paradigm Shift, Innovative Strategies to Online Learning, with a focus on innovations on online learning. She has had numerous conferences, presentation in the area of statistics and mathematics, and I'm happy to present to us Emily to give us perspectives from the lecturer or faculty. Dr. Roche, please.
Thank you so much, Desmond. And wow, that was a real introduction, and it puts the level so high. Just like you've been told that I'm a lecturer of mathematics, but today I don't come in as a lecturer of mathematics since, oh, just a minute. Okay, I'm not a lecturer of mathematics today, but today I'm presenting in the webinar that talks about transforming how we develop research capacity of higher learning as a course facilitator, from a course facilitator's perspective. Being a math person and from African Nazarene University, then here I am talking about research methods. I know somebody's wondering now, where are we? That is exactly where we are. A mathematics person, the examples that have been given by the previous presenters are inclining more on math. There's a lot of linear algebra mentioned. There's a lot of, the bits that it really doesn't come out well. Now, how have I approached research methods when it is not math? This is remotely. The first thing that I did with my students was to share my bio. I'm sharing what I did as a math person now looking at research methods. I shared my bio with them to reduce the space because we are physically not meeting. So in my bio, I tell them a little bit about myself, a little bit about my family if I wish them to know, where I stay, what I do, any hobbies if I have. Unfortunately, I have no hobbies, but I create some hobbies because I want to know their hobbies. So my bio to them is a guide of what I want to know from them. Then at least we are in a virtual space, but we somehow understand each other. Then I approach it practically. Practicability is, instead of just having the class sessions and an assessment on, can you define this, can you say this? Everything that we learn, every concept that we learn, you have to do it practically. If we learn about variables, you have to identify variables in a problem practically. So that at least allows us to have some participation in the virtual space. To make this quite possible, I asked my students to individually get problems within their locality. So at the start, everybody comes with 3 research problems. We'll use the research problems to learn the different aspects of research methods. We use the research problems that you have to identify what are your variables, what are the nature of the variables that you have. Can you create the hypothesis from your own problem? So everybody has different problems and there are 3 in number, remember. Can you have your research questions from the same problems that you have? Can you set up your objectives? Can you talk about the methodology? What is your research design? What are the data collection methods that you're going to use for your problems? And your problems should be problems that can be taken back to your society and solve something within your society. So since you gave us your bio, we somehow understand where you come from. So we can gauge whether you're telling us the truth about where you are, because we want you to solve something within your locality, not just some academic write-up and then they are lost up there. Now, once you you have done that, for each individual step of the research, now you had your 3 research problems. You come back to class and tell us these are your problems. Your colleagues will critique. These are your variables. From your first problem, these are your independent variables. These are your dependent variables. Your colleagues will critique. I will sit and listen. Of course, we have a conference. It's a virtual conference. Everybody comes to attend. You critique your colleagues' work. You try to understand if the variables they're talking about are true variables. Are they true independent variables? Are they dependent? Are they categorical, numerical? Are the hypotheses correct? Are the objectives correct? Are they well stated? Are they workable? So you're critiquing everything your colleagues say. After every presentation, I also sit to make my comment. If the critiques were okay, I give a go ahead. If there's something I need to mention, I have to mention it. After you've made your presentation, then you go make your correction as per what we had. Remember, at the start, we are still with our 3 research problems. We'll sieve them out as we carry on. You know, we are writing about research questions, hypotheses, all of them together because it's a learning process. So we're not saying a research may only have 1 item. No, we are carrying out all of them together. Then in our research in my class, there was no wrong or right research. Since we have learned, since we know all the research designs, all of us were right. The only thing is maybe you're applying the design wrongly. So we only correct you on your approach. We only modify and change just a little bit of what you have so that what you're doing is correct. It is you who has the problem. It is you who knows your scope. It is you who knows your ability. So it was not our duty, or it was not my duty to change your course of action completely. Mine was to teach you that these are what we have. When you talk about an empirical research, this is what happens in empirical research, 1, 2, 3. Now you have understood. Now, can you go to your problem and decide what method are you going to follow? These are the methods of collecting data that we have. So go back to your problem and decide and put it down clearly that I will use this method. Come back to us, present to us, we critique, give you a go ahead, and then you continue with your write-up. So we did not have a right or wrong answer as we were moving on. Then what really mattered in this class was the bit of coming to attend presentation sessions. That was the main thing that we had. Because when the critique was happening, now that we are used to assessment, actually is our Kenyan system, we have to assess you and give you some marks. The critiquing is what was our mid-course assessment. So if you don't critique somebody else's work and how you critique somebody else's work, then you'll not have marks for your mid-course assessment. As you're critiquing, you have, it's a new problem that you're having. It's not your own problem. So you cannot talk of some sort of plagiarism that would occur because somebody brings their own problem. You're critiquing what you're meeting for the first time. You're critiquing the hypothesis for the first time, the objective for the first time. If you have no knowledge on this research design that your colleague has chosen, since you did not choose that, then you have nothing to talk about. So ideally, you should have the knowledge of almost everything. Of course, you can Google and refer if you're just confirming. So you have the knowledge of almost everything that when somebody says, this is what I'm doing, you have an idea on what to ask. You have an idea of the right approach. Then you're able, if you have no idea, then you'll not participate. And therefore, in your mid-course assessment, you have 0. As we get towards the data collection point, now we are narrowing down to 1 research problem from the 3 problems that you had. Now it's you to choose your own interest. The one, you have played around with them so many times until you're feeling, this one I can take to the end. Now choose what you think you can take to the end. Now write your complete proposal because we have gone through the entire process of research methods. The final document that you write on your single research problem is what counts as what counted as your summative proposal. When we were doing it on a face-to-face session, then we never had this bit of critiquing and all that. When you're teaching, you teach the students, and in the course of learning, they write the proposal. Then at the end of the semester, we have an exam to sit for, where we have 2-3 hours exam to write, and whether they are case studies or anything, you sit there and write your issues, and it is marked and it's over. But now this time for the virtual, I felt that was not really nice, and their write-up ended up being their summative proposal and the summative exam, and then we proceeded on. Now, all this did not occur without challenges. Remember, I did research methods for graduate students. So what are the few challenges that I experienced? The first challenge is that my students were adults who were engaged in different activities, who are in different time zones, and then I want them to participate in class. That was not quite easy, but yes, we went through it. The second challenge, these same adults, most of them are self-sponsored, or maybe from the organizations, they have the sponsorship to come to class. So their driving forces are so different. Somebody else just wants to finish up and take to their sponsor, their employer, that this is what I have done. Then there came the lecturer's own engagement. This was a major challenge because remember, these students are adults, they have different engagements. You have scheduled for them a time that they need to come for the video conference. Based on the engagements, they may not appear. Our routine was, for every conference that we have, we record. So they all expect recordings of the sessions that you have. Now, one student believes the other student is in class. The other student believes the other student is in class. Ultimately, none of them is there. This is the time you had planned for the conference. Remember, they're all waiting for a recording. So you learn to talk to yourself. Make a recording for yourself, because time is also of essence. And that just brought me the thought that I think we need to go for some journalism classes so that we learn the art of talking to yourself like journalists who talk to themselves for many hours, and it works for them. And then the other challenge was the desktop activities. You see, we are talking about practical approach. We're talking about data collection. We have a method like observation. You tell the students, can you go out and observe and give me a write-up? What were your guiding points as you're carrying out your observation? It is COVID time. They shared with you their biography. They shared with you their environment, where they are, Then you find what they are writing, they had an activity that just doesn't tally with the times. So that clearly tells you that they only sat on their desktops or laptops and carried out a research and wrote for you details from what other people had written. Then with that, I asked them, now, can you share with me the pictures of what you're doing? If you're carrying out an interview, have a recording of your interviews. Tag me on some of these activities, because I realized this at an early stage. So in the later stages, I would ask for you to be part of them. When you tag me, of course, it doesn't mean that I'll be there, but you're not sure on which day I'll be there and which day I'll not be there. But at least you're carrying out the activity so that you learn. It's not because you just want to write it down and leave it. And then we have the time constraint also was a challenge during our time, because we want to, I want to give feedback to all the students. I want them to present, I want them to critique. When we have face-to-face, when we come for a 3-hour class, I'll give comment to 15, 20 students at the same time, because I can sit and tell this person, It's different from the online. And that is how my experience was teaching. Thank you so much for listening to the session. Now you are free to ask any questions. If there are, I may not have answers for you, but together we pull up together and give our answers. Bye.
Thanks so much, Dr. Roche, for sharing your experiences on how you were able to facilitate your research methodology class during this regime, and sharing with us some of the challenges and even perhaps a bit of the strategies that you adopted to cope with the challenges. Can we interact with the Dr. Roche for some 5 or so minutes? Any questions for her? Any inquiries or any additions on what she has shared with us from your own experiences?
Can I start? This is Dr. Mora.
Yes, Dr. Maura, please.
I want to thank the 3 presenters so much because they have given a lot of their experiences. Now, for the last one, I've been teaching SPSS, application of statistics in the software of SPSS. And one of the challenges that I have found, and which possibly the university is not taking into consideration, is the fact that you have to ensure that the students have the software itself, and they have a bit of knowing what it is. When a human being is on the other side of the screen, and you are teaching on the other side of the screen, and you have not basically been together for them to see these things that they call SPSS, this thing they call starter, this thing they call this software. And you have not even put an opportunity for them to enter, to have the software uploaded. You find that it is a very, very serious challenge, where you find some students are going on with the whole course of application of statistics and application to SPSS without the SPSS itself. So possibly we need to think about whether there are some subjects where there have to be some bit of physical, and then after possibly a day or 2, they can go and we can have virtue. I don't know what our sister has experienced in terms of that, and particularly when you come to data analysis. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Emmy?
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Ray. I have also had such a challenge, especially with the, should I call them analysis packages? And you know, one thing, when you talk to students about math, statistics, half of them block, actually not half, 2/3 of them will block their minds, given that they only want to do research. Now, come to talk about SPSS, now you're blocking the other third that was left. So you'd be left with half of the third that was left with you. Now, I learned not to talk about SPSS at the start. Initially, we had Excel being a bit inferior to most of the packages. But currently the Excel software, which is available for most of them, is not as inferior. And because it's a starting point, when we were learning virtually, I engaged them on Excel. So all of them had the software. When they collected their data, and then of course I limited the amount of data that they were supposed to collect, all of them worked on Excel to clean up their data, to do the basic analysis. Now, from there, a student, you see, I'm sharing my experience. A student, I assume that a student who had extra interest on analysis now can go an extra mile. Because they have done the basics, it's now easier for them to proceed to, to get to the next level, and out of their own will, now seek the next package for analysis. That was the thought that I had. So for the virtual class, I only used Excel, and that's what we carried, because I believe SPSS is just an extension of Excel. Then when you go to the starter, the R, once you learn the basics, you can always advance easily. That was my approach.
Thank you, Emmy, and just for even reminding us that Excel has some powerful features that we can continue exploiting as we grapple with them. How do we get these other advanced packages? Maybe one more. I can see Prof. Namlungu there, thanking you for the approach. Candy, have you picked something? Dr. Wanja?
Maybe just a comment by Suki that I think is really important. She pointed to Dr. Roche's approach of the basic introductions at the beginning and sharing of the bio to bridge that gap between the student, the distance between the student and the faculty. I don't know whether Dr. Suki would like to just add to that comment a little bit more.
Thank you very much. You caught me a little off guard, but yeah, I have found that as I've been teaching students, the bio brings a context for both you and the student, but also as you investigate their bio, you'll actually find whatever interests that they have come out, and it contextualizes their research. And also they begin to value that they have something to share. Research is not a difficult thing. It's something that you're familiar with. And also it helps to identify the passion that they have. So it really builds the confidence of the student and builds the relationship. Because I found at the beginning especially, most just sort of are blocked out and don't know where to move, but they have an idea. And often the idea is related to their bio. And you can see the relationship and you can help bring that out and let them realize they have the information and it can solve a problem and have an impact to improve their situation and their community.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dr. Suki. And I can see even from Dr. Muhavini there, he recognized that maths is very important but unpopular. And he's asking if you have any innovating ways of encouraging them. And I was just wondering, Emmy, does your gender play any role in encouraging folks to venture into this maths and research area as a lady?
I'm not sure my gender plays some role in encouraging, but yeah, I know math is quite unpopular. Yeah, it's upon we, the facilitators of math, to try and demystify that. The previous presenters talked about linear algebra being so abstract, but quite applicable in day-to-day life. All of you have done regression. All of us are sitting here, I believe, have done regression. So anytime you meet a concept, at least it's good to bring the students to accept that this is part of their day-to-day lives. You see, like even you're talking about a matrix, you ask a student, have you ever seen, do you think matrices are applicable? They tell you, yes, applicable in KCSE exams. You tell them, yes, at least that is one, you know? So what is the other application of this? Our day-to-day timetables, our day-to-day schedules are on matrices. So when you bring it down to what they understand, the menus that they have, different approaches, just tell the students how they can see it in real life. Not all concepts can be seen. So other concepts, you'll tell them, it's there to help them in critical thinking. And then they'll, since you look at the content and try and start with what will pull them closer to you as you move to the abstract one in between, and then it doesn't become quite unpopular, because when students come in to start, they start with the basics. Before they get into linear algebra and machine learning, at least they've done the basic mathematics, and they have seen they are quite applicable, including topics that they thought should not even be done in math. That's something that really works. It has worked for the face-to-face. Now, when you come to virtual, for math, my dear, for me, I know I invest a lot of time. Invest a lot of time for the students, because you'll try to bring them close. What you should have covered in 1 hour on a face-to-face session, you will do it in 2.5 hours in a virtual session for them to appreciate it, because of the unpopularity that is there. But we have no choice, because math is part of life. We have to do it. So we have to struggle and bring them on board.
Yeah, and thank you, Emmy. I think, again, you just re-emphasizing what came out earlier from the previous presenters, that the tasks we engage with the students must really be authentic. They must relate to what we see on a day-to-day basis in our lives, and they must relate to what our life after school will entail. Brian, did I see your hand? Candy, we want to wind this session up. It's already 12:10 and we're out of our time.
Yeah, I think we're good to continue to the last bit. People were just clapping for Amy, especially that comparison.
So it's me with my technology. I thought that was a hand raise. It was clapping.
Yeah, we were clapping for her. That's
Okay.
removing the abstractness of mathematics. Yeah.
I've learned something, how to clap virtually. So I think let's now move to the tail end by just looking at what lessons you have picked from here. And maybe before Dr. Wanja chats us up about generally what lessons you have picked and paint a way forward. Dr. Kanyaru, if you're still in the house, would you maybe just come back to the floor a little and share with us, generally again, for about 3-4 minutes, what your observations are, and still some of the opportunities that we have now going forward.
I think, thanks a lot. I really enjoyed that talk from our maths teacher there. It's excellent. I think you should teach everybody maths. So I think here the thing is we can learn a lot from one another, to be honest. And I suspect also maybe we should open our eyes a little bit into what resources are there we can tap into, especially if we have all these lessons now we've learned, especially this systematic approach of bringing empirical research and engaging students from where they are. Also, I think we're agreeing that even some of the topics that traditionally seen as difficult, I think maybe we should rethink what technology can do there to help us disseminate better. And it's a good job we are owning up to this problem. It's not just a problem in Kenya, it's a big problem here. When I'm teaching programming, I see some very sad faces in front of me. But so I'm thinking more towards looking for funding. I think I just need to do a little bit more work and share with you, Dennis, and Wanja there, so that the team here, we can start collaborating and doing some work, because maybe an approach like this one of engaging research students is one that can be, if you like, can be scaled up. And I also think it's time to think about when we consider how to teach, say, computing or coding or maths, can it actually be done with technology better? Maybe better, maybe. Because all I'm talking about is it possible for a tool to support the teaching of something in a better way than it is now? If it's possible, we are saying it's not being done now. So can we start thinking and putting down our ideas and asking other people the same question? So basically this is what I'm calling requirements. And yeah, and maybe that way we can start now looking for opportunities for funding. That's all I'm going to say for now. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you so much, John, for just indicating that there are world of opportunities outside there for us to tap into. And the consortium we have here will take advantage of that opening. Dr. Wanja, in just about 5 minutes, I would like to leave. What do you think is the way forward from here? What are the lessons you picked?
Thank you very much, colleagues and the presenters. That was really, really great. I've also learned a lot. From what I picked is that as a way forward, one as AFELT, and I would like to welcome you all to join AFELT so that we can continue learning from each other. That is one of the way forward. We have heard from our student that we need to encourage deep learning Assessment, we need to see how we do our assessments, giving authentic tasks, providing safe spaces for the students to learn, so that students are able to challenge themselves, but also to challenge us as faculty. And as a way forward, we are going to take those learnings into whatever that we do. This particular webinar was just to exchange ideas among ourselves and also to learn. I've really picked a lot from what Brian has said. I've picked a lot from what Amy has said, how she's teaching and how we can simplify and demystify the way some of the concepts that we have, being more practical, even small things like using our bio. I will improve on my own bio in my virtual class. So we pick up those learnings and we try to allow the learnings to improve the way we teach. And that's the reason that we're here, really, to just exchange ideas. So as a take home today is that we need to create safe space. That one has come through from all the presenters. And I think that's what, and we need to allow deep learning. That's as a way forward. We're going to do that. We're going to see how we implement that. And we shall be sharing more in the next webinar, which will be coming up. And I think Desmond will remind us what the topic for the next webinar is. It's at the end of, I think 28th of July, we'll have our 4th webinar. And what we're trying to do is incrementally to add on the learnings from the first webinar to the second one. The first one was the change of mindset. How do we change our mindset? How do we, so that we are no longer fixated in what we have? And that was our first webinar. Then we looked at teaching at the research, and now we are here today. And moving forward, we will be having the next webinar to also see how do we publish better, how do we translate the research findings into practical. And I'm liking what you have, and I think for all of us, since you have all registered, we hope that you'll be able to join in the next webinar when we call, and invite others, because the more we exchange ideas, the better we sharpen ourselves. Thank you so much for joining. We are always grateful to have you and staying on, and we apologize that we are already 20 minutes into the time. Thank you, Desmond.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Wanja. I don't know if our chairman was able to join us. Have you seen Dr. Charles Kingsbury, just to greet us?
I think he's not.
Yeah, Mary Kiguru, can you greet us on his behalf?
Desmond, you said I do what?
Yeah, well, we would have wanted to hear just Dr. Kingsbury's voice, but he's not in. What would you say in his absence if you are him?
If I was him, and in consideration of what has taken place in this space, I can say that we are all in agreement that we are leading our students to be. He's been a preacher of not prescribing what you want your students to be, but understanding your students so that you can guide them to become the people they want to be. That's the only way they can contribute to our society. He's a transformative learning facilitator, and he's been our mentor, basically, in this particular forum. So even as we go on to change how researching is taught in our university, or how we actually build our research capacity, is also to understand that we are building each other and we are building our country. And every student that comes to us has a desire to be somebody, even if they are being sponsored and they want to adhere to the requirements of their sponsor. The organization wants to change and they want to become somebody in that particular organization. How can we best lead them to be that? So thank you so much to our presenters for creating this space. Brian, I'm really impressed. The student perspective, I think we never listened to students, and I'm glad that Dr. Roche and Dr. Kanyaru were part of this particular forum to also give us the perspective of researchers from the university. For me, I facilitate a program that bridges education to employment, and building that capacity is critical for me. And I'm a founder member of AFELT, the secretary to the organization. So I invite all of you to be part of this forum. Sharing our experiences and what we learn is what is going to improve the learning in higher education. They say that knowledge is generated in the process of work. We are working and we are learning and we generate a lot of knowledge. So this is the space for us to actually share with each other and create this particular database. Thank you so much, and may God bless you as you change as you improve the research capacity in your institution. Thank you, Desmond.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mary, on behalf of the chairman. And I know in Africa, we've been blamed for maybe releasing very little research, and maybe even the quality of what we release has been put to question. So what we as faculty need to be asking ourselves, I think something I want to borrow from Dr. Wa, let's just remember that when you see that researcher outside there, somebody trained them. They have passed through somebody's hands, and we are the hands through which these researchers are getting their orientation from. So let's plant the seed, let's continue engaging so that the capacity within the university is enhanced for doing research.